Hello, vinyl community and everyone else watching this. In the past, I've seen a whole lot of people rank albums, and I always sort of liked those videos. I always thought that was a good idea, and that I'd like to do one someday, but I waited till I could think of something maybe that no one else has done. By the way, how is everybody? Hope you're all well. Been watching your videos. Anyway. So, somebody always knocks me out and says, hey, this has been done, but I haven't seen one of these. So I thought I would rank the Beatles' American albums. Now, only American albums made originally for the American market. Sometimes, especially Japan would issue them, and sometimes Canada would, and even England and Europe would issue them once in a while, later, or even right after. But these are specifically designed to be made for the American market. So, there's 18 by my count albums made specifically for America, and I've counted albums that are different from their European counterparts. I have counted those, and before I start, I wanted to say that one of the big things in my ranking was the rip-off factor. I made this to make a buck, a quick buck kind of album, a cash-in album. The more I thought it was a cash-in album, the lower it is on my ranking scale. So there's 18 of them. Any guesses what the worst American Beatle album is? Any Beatle fan out there should be able to suss this one out right away. Here we go. The absolute worst Beatle album. The Beatles Story, of course it is. A complete cash-in album. There's about a 30-second snippet of Twist and Shout in here, and that's all you get. You get Paul telling the people he bought his father a racehorse. You know, big deal. So there you go. I'm not going to get him out or anything. This is an Apple copy, I think. There you go. The absolute, number 18, the absolute, in my opinion, worst American Beatle album. Number 17, some of you are going to balk at, but when you hear my reasoning, maybe not. This is number 17. And I'm only doing the Capitol albums, by the way, and that's where this comes in. It wouldn't be that low if I counted the United Artists, but this is the Capitol edition. It never came out till the 80s, and by this time the European version was already out, and you could get the United Artists version if you wanted the George Martin soundtrack material. Therefore, this album is nothing but a way for Capitol Records to make a few more bucks putting out the already existing Hard Day's Night in United Artists copy. So this is a total cash cow ripoff, and everybody knows, everybody buys every album the Beatles put out, therefore you have to have this, and that's why it exists. It's the only reason it exists. Therefore, number 17. And in fact, I like it better than the Help soundtrack. So, there you go. Some people might chagrin, but this is number 16 on my list. Not a cash cow, but just the songs from the film, and not even all of them, because to make it a true soundtrack, She's a Woman should be on here, because that was definitely featured in the film. But there you go. And the George Martin stuff isn't nearly as good as it is on the Hard Day's Night album, in my opinion. And it's just an album I don't like to listen to. I'd rather listen to the British one by far. So I know some of you might disagree, but number 16 on my list. A very close number 15 on my list. Complete nonsense album. It just took some of the soundtrack songs and put them on an album. Just again, hadn't had a Beatle album in a couple years, better put one out. So we took this, made this hideous cover, And we put this out. The Beatles, I don't even know what it's called, Real Music, and total cash cow album. And there you go, number 15 on my list. About a year before, I think. Ooh, we haven't had a Beatle album out in a while. Beatles number 1. It's better than that because at least it has a theme that actually works. 20 greatest hits, basically 20 number 1 records in America pretty much, but I think there's actually more than that. And they cut Hey Jude down to 5 minutes. And that's my major gripe with this. Plus they just tried to fit too many songs on one album for fidelity's sake. So, there you go. If you don't know this album, maybe you can get the set list. I don't know. But there you go. Number 14, The Beatles, 20 Greatest Hits. This would be higher, but for a reason I'm going to get to. The Beatles' Rock and Roll Music. It's actually a good compilation of their rockin' tunes. And as an album, it plays really well. It might even be better than 62 to 66 or 67 to 70. It just flows really well. And it's a nice listen. Why is it number 13? 2 reasons. 1, the absolutely hideous cover. And 2, again with that completist thing in mind, I only have one of these, but they decided to release it a couple of years later as a 2-record set individually, so that we'd have to go out and buy both of these as well. And that knocked it down on my list quite a ways. Beatles Rock and Roll Music, number 13. 12, it got to be about 1978. Ooh, we haven't had a Beatle album out in a while. Love songs. But again, I think it flows really nice as an album. And it is love songs, and it is nice, mellow music. If you want to listen to some nice, mellow Beatles, it's not bad. It's a complete cash-in album. And the cover's not the best, but it's a lot better than Rock and Roll Music. And I kind of like it. Now we're getting into albums I at least have respect for. So, love songs, number 12. You notice most of the compilations are coming well ahead of, well, behind the real albums. Number 11, Japanese copy, but here you go. I couldn't be bothered to dig out my American one. Hey Jude, the Beatles again. What I have against this is 2 things. 1, it's sort of the last Beatle album, and that's a shame. It came out after Let It Be, and it's a shame just because it's a compilation, and they could have fit more songs on here. The idea was to round up all the singles that weren't on the American albums. But where's The Inner Light? Where's I'm Down? That's just a couple right there that were never on American albums. So it's incomplete if you want to do that. But it has a great cover, and it does have a decent flow for an album. And overall, it's not too bad. So that's number 11 on my list. But again, pretty much a cash-in album. Might have even been contractual obligation, I'm not sure. Number 10. An album I have very little like for, but it's a sort of a real album. The early Beatles. They took Please Please Me and took 3 of the best songs off it. Made it an 11-song album. That's my real problem with it. And released it. And Introducing the Beatles is better by VJ, and it was out there. Or again, well, Please Please Me wasn't available when they did this, but still, I know they wanted their stuff on Capitol and not VJ, but it's never been my favorite. It's too short, and I'd much rather listen to a British album or Introducing the Beatles. Number 9, what I think is probably their best American compilation. Now, there was a European Rarities. This is Rarities. But this is the American. And it has interesting stuff on it. Some of it's forced and manufactured. But it does have interesting stuff on it. It gives you the butcher cover on the inside, which is really nice. And I thought as a Rarities album, it did pretty well. So, of all the compilations, this is my favorite. Beatles Rarities coming in at number 9. A lot of you are going to cringe at this one because it's only at number 8. Rubber Soul or Revolver. I know it's a lot of you's favorite albums, and it's one of my favorites. It's top 4 probably, 3 or 4. The reason it's lower on the American is they didn't change it at all. They just took 3 songs off. And they didn't have to take 3 off. They really only had to take 2 off. But they took 3 songs off, and they took Angie Bird Can Sing off, which is one of my favorites on here. So, Beatles or Revolver comes in at number 8, and that's why. I just don't... The British Revolver is way better than the American Revolver. Now it gets tight, but I picked the Beatles' second album at number 7, and there's nothing wrong with this. I just don't think it's quite as good as the other ones, and there is only 11 songs on it again, and there could be 12. So, no real reason. It's just I don't think it stands up to, let's say, this album, which comes in at, where are we, 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 6. This is Mean Mr. Mayo, Joe's favorite Beatle album, I believe, and it's good. Again, it only has 11 songs, and it could have 12. They were cool and put Come Give Her Dinah Hand on here, which is really cool. And it's a good album. And number 6, they can't all be number 1. In my opinion, an even better album, Beatles 65. I like that Capitol sort of split up the darker, in large part, not totally, songs, more rockin' songs from Beatles for Sale, and put the brighter ones, for the most part, on another album. I kind of like that. So this is Beatles 65. It's a lot of rock and roll, a lot of covers, and they took the singles at the time, as they were doing, and put them on and made an album, and I like it. And I've said in another video, I like the fidelity of this album, too, in stereo. I think it sounds really good. Somebody's already disputed me on that, but I actually like it. I like the sound of it a lot. I think it's a really good mix. One of the better, if not the best, American mixed albums. Number 4, its counterpart, Beatles 6. Half of 6, not 65, half of Beatles for Sale is on here. Again, 11 songs. Most of them just have 11 songs, and that's, you know, not the best, but I always liked this. I always thought this worked as an album. It had a nice flow, and it worked really well as an album. So I have no problems with the Beatles. 6, obviously, is its number 4 on my list. Number 3 is a completely manufactured album, Yesterday and Today, but growing up was one of my favorites, if not my favorite Beatle album. I had this, and my brother had Revolver, and I liked this better. Some of my favorite songs from Revolver and Rubber Soul are on here, and there's a track listing for those of you not familiar with this album. And yeah, the cover is sort of a slapped together job because of the Butcher cover and all of that, but growing up I really liked this album. So, and I still do. Again, 11 songs, but this is number 3 on my American Beatle albums list. Number 2 is Rubber Soul. I don't hate what the Americans did to it, and some days I prefer this album over the British. I like I've Just Seen a Face and It's Only Love on here. They fit. And to me, it doesn't take anything away from the album at all. There's the American set list for those of you that don't know it. For me, I won't say it's a complete improvement, but unlike Revolver, I don't think they heard it. So, there you go. Rubber Soul is my number 2. So, for those of you that know the American albums, do you know what number 1 is? You're probably shocked. Meet the Beatles is, I think, the best American Beatle album. I like that they put the current single, opened it with I Wanna Hold Your Hand, and launched right into I Saw Her Standing There. I think it gives this album a boost in energy that the second British album doesn't have. There's the set list. So I think in some ways the Americans improved on the second Beatle album with this. The mix isn't the best or anything, but it's better, again, I think, than the British mix. There's some, you listen to Money or I Wanna Hold Your Hand, and there's some balls behind it, and it's lacking in the British mix, in my opinion. I like the reverb in this case. I like what they did with it. So, there you go. Believe it or not, I think the best of the 18 American Beatle albums. I know I rushed right through that. I didn't want to make this too long, but I've been wanting to make this video. I hope you enjoy it. Leave me comments. Let me know what you think. I'd be really interested in knowing on this one, and I will get around to responding eventually. So again, thanks for watching. Check out my podcast, snapcracklepop.podomatic.com. Oh, and by the way, some people have been interested in this. We've been listening to one of the records in part 2 of the Beatles' Alpha to Omega is what we've been listening to in the background. I don't even know which record. I picked the side that looked long. Okay, thanks again for watching. Hope everybody's okay. I'm going to keep watching your videos. Keep them coming. I'm loving them. I love the VC. You guys just make my day. When I'm come home from work and I'm tired, I put on some VC videos and it just makes me happy. Okay, please leave comments. Let me know what you thought of this, and I'll catch you later. Thanks, VC.